Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Atheniano Show, where each episode is a new ripple containing unknown but unlimited impact. Um, Today, I want to talk about a podcast clip that I recently saw and thought was very interesting. Um, it's from a podcast called the Flagrant podcast. Now, I don't really know anything about this podcast, but they had a guest on named Dave Smith. And I also don't really know much about Dave Smith, but I've heard him talk in some other interviews about issues related to foreign policy, and he had some interesting takes. So I clicked on the video, the podcast video, listened to the first 15 minutes, and within the first 15 minutes, there was a really interesting conversation taking place, which I thought was worth talking about. So I'm going to play a brief clip from the podcast, and then we're going to basically talk about it. Just for context, the clip revolves around the preponderance of extremism on social media and Twitter. And more specifically, they're talking about how the extreme viewpoints really hurt criticisms of real causes. So I guess more specifically, they're talking about how the preponderance of real anti-Semitism and Jew hatred on Twitter actually serves to really hurt any real criticisms of Israel that are out there. Dave Smith is Jewish himself, but is one of the staunchest critics of Israel, the state. And so his point is that when you have like this crazy amount of real anti-Semitism and real Jew hatred on Twitter, it actually discredits the criticisms of Israel and actually helps the pro-Israel viewpoints because it feeds into their ideas that, everybody who criticizes Israel is actually, a Hitler sympathizer. And so that's kind of the context of this clip. The clip goes on to talk about other things that I think are more interesting. But so without further ado, I'll play the clip and then we'll get into it.
Is completely discredits any logical and fair criticisms of Israel and what's happening right now.
It's not. I wouldn't say it discredits it, but it allows a pro-Israel voice to say. It allows them to go, well, look at all this anti-Semitism.
You can't disprove them because when I'm on Twitter, I'm like, yeah, it seems like they.
It's really hard. It's really hard to know exactly what's going on with all of that stuff because in social media, it's almost always accounts without like a real name on them. I'm like, is this a 14-year-old trolling? Is this somebody? Is it a 14-year-old whose stepdad just beat the crap out of him or something? Or is this like a real deal? Like I have been reading Mein Kampf, and I agree with
foreign government that's paying for it? And
is it our own government?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Really?
Yeah, they love this stuff.
I mean, they could.
Wait. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. So break that down. I've heard the foreign government thing. I thought this was really interesting. So anytime there's like dissension within America, it behooves our enemies to stoke as much of that as possible, right? So they could just put the juice on it. You can buy ads, you can inflate tweets, you can do whatever you want to continue that discourse that is incredibly, let's say, toxic or problematic. Why would our own government do it?
Well, because you already said our enemies are doing it. And that's our biggest enemies are in Washington, D.C. So, I mean, well, look, think about it like this, right?
How would it benefit them, I guess?
Well, I'd just say, first of all, have our own political leaders and our own corporate media, have they not been stoking all these divisions all these years? I mean, like, they push it more than anybody. I mean, it's like, since, basically for the last, 12 years.
All right, so that was the clip. There's a couple things going on here, as I mentioned, but the basic point that he's making, and he goes on to make it in more detail in the rest of the podcast, is that he's hypothesizing or I guess claiming that potentially the U.S. government could stoke division in the country to do two things. The first point that he alludes to is that it could stoke division or stoke these extremist points on Twitter, on social media, whatever it is, to help delegitimize the positions or the arguments against their own policy. So maybe they're trying to discredit the arguments against Israel. And the government is obviously pro-Israel, has a lot of pro-Israel stances. So in order to discredit those arguments against Israel, they flood with a bunch of extremist views. That's one of the points he kind of discreetly makes. The second that he goes on to talk about more is this idea of the government stoking division in society to prevent basically the people of the country from actually paying attention to the direct relationship between the government and the people, and also from preventing them from really paying attention and coming together on the issues that matter most to them. So I don't want, he hypothesizes that this happens in the United States, or at least he's talking about that. For purposes of this video, I don't want to make any kind of empirical claim or use any specific example to talk about this phenomenon. But I do want to talk about it in a theoretical sense because I think it's an important idea. But I just for clarity's sake, I don't want to talk about it in an empirical manner. But breaking down more specifically this idea, this phenomenon, essentially, what he's explaining is this idea where the government pushes, as I mentioned, pushes an issue that is not vital or not super important to the public, to the people, and pushes it so as to hide their own ineptitude, their own corruption, their own failings, to actually do the things that they're supposed to do the things that are important to the people. So rather than the people paying attention or focusing on the shortcomings of the government, instead, the government makes them focus and pay attention to these trivial issues and get really worked up about these trivial issues. And I'll give an example, just a theoretical example, to help elucidate this point. So suppose, hypothetically, right, the government is taking the taxpayer money and using it to fight wars and send weapons overseas, basically to promote wars and conflicts overseas in order so that they can sell their weapons. And the government is doing that because it fills their own pockets. So they use taxpayer money to basically sell weapons and promote conflicts overseas so that they can enrich their own pockets. Let's just say that's what they're doing. Crazy idea, I know. And let's say they don't want the public to pay attention to what they're doing. So instead, they flood the social media algorithms with this other idea, right? And let's just take a hypothetical social issue that's not that important, but people may have differing opinions on. So wearing just your underwear in public, no shirt, no pants, no socks, whatever. Wearing just your underwear in public, right? And so let's say the government really wants the people to care about this. So maybe you have some people in the country, like one group of people in the country that feel like, yeah, I really think that underwear should not be allowed. You should not be allowed to wear just underwear in public because who wants to see that? And it's not very respectful and traditional, and it's not a great way to organize a society. So one side feels like it shouldn't be legal, and the other side says, well, I think it should be legal because you don't know people's socioeconomic standpoint, and maybe it also discriminates against homeless people. So one side generally is against it, and the other side is generally thinks it should be legal. The government shouldn't regulate it. And fair enough. Those are both reasonable standpoints. They opposing each other, but they're both reasonable, and it's not really going to be the issue that would otherwise divide the country in such a stark way. But let's say to make it such an important issue, the government not only floods social media algorithms with topics related to wearing underwear in public, but they put out all of these extreme tweets to showcase the most fringe positions on this subject to get people really worked up about it. So let's say on one side, right, the tweets that are promoted or promulgated or pushed up are stuff that says something like, people wearing underwear in the streets are degrading the fabric of our society. They're the root of all evil. It's their lack of care or respect or laziness that is infecting the rest of people in our society like vermin, and it's threatening to destroy the very basic fabric of our country and our people, because their laziness and lack of care, letting them walk around and exist, is just basically like it's the equivalent of like letting rats and cockroaches just run free on the sidewalk, and nobody doing anything about it. So they'd say, just like the rats on the sidewalk, these people wearing just underwear need to be eliminated, right? That's, a pretty extreme rhetoric, pretty extreme position. But let's just say you have a ton of social media accounts, again, with these anonymous names, being flooded in the algorithms, such that like that's what a lot of people are seeing. And if a lot of people are seeing that, well, then there's like going to be this outrage on the other side. Oh my God, how could, these people think like this? How could they have this, immoral position on such an issue? I cannot believe they think that homeless people are like rats and need to be exterminated. This is such foul language. We need to stand up to protect people wearing underwear's rights because they're under threat from one part of the society. And then let's say on the other side, the stuff that's being promoted in response to the extreme anti-underwear position is this outlandish celebration of people wearing underwear in the streets. People wearing underwear in the streets need to be celebrated and is the model of freedom and expression, and clothes are the oppressive nature of society, and it's just that we haven't freed ourselves from the shackles of oppression, that we're not able to take our clothes off, and blah, 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 right? Some extreme position, whatever it is. And then so the side that's opposed, it says, oh my goodness, how could these people think like this? How could these people have this, how could these people have this extreme position on underwear? These people have lost their minds, blah, 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 blah. And then they get the outrage, right? So you can see how the preponderance of the extreme positions causes outrage on the moderates. But in reality, they're not having outrage against each other. They're having outrage against the extreme positions, but both sides actually believe that the moderate positions are the extreme positions, or that they have the extreme positions. And so sooner or later, because people are talking about this issue, because they're seeing all these extreme positions, they're fighting the algorithms, this gets picked up by pundits, by commentators, whoever it is, because this is the issue that's getting a lot of attention and is trending and whatever. So in order to get eyeballs, get attention, bring in the money, the viewerships, all these pundits and commentators and outlets are feeding the flames of this underwear issue. And so sooner or later, the public discourse, the public discussion has revolved around has revolved so heavily around this underwear issue. Such that when an election or some big political event happens, that's what people are, fighting for, or that's what the discourse is centered around. One side is going to, go around exterminating all of the people wearing underwear on the streets. And the other side is saying, well, if you vote for the other side, they're going to, everybody's going to be walking around in piss-stained underwear all day. And do you really want a society like that? And so you can see how sooner or later, right, hypothetically, this becomes the regular discourse. And in reality, right, people are not, most people would not otherwise care that much about this issue, and it hides. And if we're going along with this idea that the government is doing this on purpose, as a result of this, people are no longer talking or focusing their attention on the fact that government is taking our money and filling their own pockets to start wars overseas. We're not focusing on the corruption. We're not focusing on the failure to fix inner cities, to give money to the people that don't need it, to fix to give more money to our schools, our public parks, our communities, our neighborhoods, the people that need it, right? They're failing to actually help people that need it. And we aren't focused on that because we're focused on this stupid underwear issue. Now, again, I don't want to make any kind of claims about the actual empirical preponderance of this in any country. But I do think from a theoretical perspective, again, this raises a lot of important insights about, the way that politics and political situations work. Because in general, people still think about this dichotomy between autocracy and democracy, right? Democracy, free and good and transparency. Autocracy, bad, control, blah, 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 blah. Right? But I think that's a little bit outdated, because the autocratic nature of a government having control over somebody no longer exists, or no longer is limited to this hands-on, top-down approach where the government is like holding people in shackles, showing them all their power, and the people are just like physically held down. Right? Because that is actually a relatively unstable form of control. Because you're showing people exactly where the power is, exactly where the control is. And even though it may be tough, you're actually showing them how to get out of it, how to get out of those shackles that control. What a stronger form of control is when people are being manipulated and controlled and taken advantage of without them actually realizing it, or with them thinking, without them having, paying attention to where the actual control is. And I've said this in previous videos, that the best way to control people, to maintain power over people, is to make them feel like they are powerful, like they have some control, like they're making a difference, like they can make a difference, without them actually being able to make a difference. Right? So I'll use two examples for this. One, I'll go back to the underwear example. Maybe people feel like they have such control in the elections or the political events because they have real purpose and they really feel like they can make a difference to either legalize or make illegal wearing underwear in public. And they say, we can really make a difference because only if we vote these people out and get them out of office, then we can really make underwear legal, or and stop them trying to kill all these people with underwear. Or only if we vote these people out of office and rally and get all these people in, then we can clean up society and stop making, underwear wearing this norm, right? And that gives people purpose, right? It can turn out people, it can make them like, oh yes, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this. But if, regardless of who they vote in, whoever is in power, that person or that party or that system in power is still going to steal money from them and fail to do their job, fail to do the things that they actually are supposed to do, fail to actually help people, then you're not really doing anything, from a material standpoint. You're not actually doing anything to help yourself. You're thinking that you're doing something to help yourself or to make a difference, but in reality, the fabric is not changing. And so, you know, the other example is if you're fighting with somebody, right? And they have their hands on your neck and they're strangling you and sucking out their oxygen, right? Well, if you think that the fight is actually at your toes, at your feet, and it's a feet fight, and the goal is to keep the person away from your feet, well, they may let you win that battle at the feet, right? They may say, okay, like you're winning. You're able to remove my hands from your feet or my feet from your feet. Like you're winning that foot battle. But if they still have their hands on your throat and are sucking out the oxygen, you winning the foot battle doesn't really matter. It matters, like, it's so insignificant compared to the control that they have over your neck while they're sucking up the oxygen of your out of your lungs. Whereas if you know that the person has the grip on your neck, right? It may be hard. They may have a really strong grip on your neck. But if you know that that's where the fight is, at least you can focus on all your energy and at least try to free your grasp, right? It may be difficult. It may be incredibly hard, but at least you know and know where to focus your energy and have at least a glimpse of hope of getting out of it. But if you don't even know that that's where the fight is, and yet you're being struggled, you're toast. You're toast. There's no way you're breaking free of that control. And I think that is really, really important concept, because the idea of democracy that we think of is if you can have elections whereby you can elect people, they count the votes, they go through the process, whoever you vote for, whoever gets the most votes wins, or whatever the process is, and blah, 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 right? You can change government, you can do all these things, you can mobilize whatever it is. That's all great, right? But I also think democracy is not really democracy without a crucial element. And again, I'm talking purely in the theoretical here. I don't want to give anybody the idea that I'm talking about an empirical case. I'm not. I'm still talking in the theoretical. If democracy is at its core δημοκρατία. Demos it was the people, and kratos is rule, government. So it's rule of the people. Now, what the people actually is in a democracy is a whole nother discussion. But if the elections are just for like issues and things that are surface level and are not really benefiting the people, right? If you can have all these elections and switch people and do all these things to make changes at the surface level, but the fact that the government is not helping the people or is not for the people, is not actually doing things for the people, again, that's a very abstract term, the people, but that's another discussion. But if you're not actually doing things for the people, then what is the point of the elections? And it's an interesting question. Like, well, is that really a democracy then? It's elections, yeah, but is it a government for the people? And if it is a democracy, and it is, if you do agree that it's still democracy for the people, why is that desirable? If the government still fucks people over, but you can choose which people are fucking you over, right? It's only really beneficial if you can choose people who are not going to fuck you over, who are going to help you. If you have the power to kick the people who are fucking you over out. And again, you may technically have that power legally, but if they're doing all these things to distract your attention and manipulate your mind such that the issues that you care about, the issues that matter, that, you know, are at the forefront of your battle, the forefront of your struggle, are not actually that important, and are not actually like the issues that matter to you. So you're like almost brainwashed into focusing on these non-important issues while the government continues to fuck you over, then they're not really like giving you a fair shot to. It's at the minimum, it's disingenuous to say that they're giving you a fair shot to actually create a government for the people. And so, yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I thought it was a very interesting discussion. I've talked about this issue on other podcast episodes. I'll maybe put some of them in the description. I'll also put the full link to the podcast episode from the clip in the description. Again, I don't know anything about it, know anything about those guys. But the first 15 minutes I saw seem decent. Seem like fine guys. Probably are, because most people aren't jackasses. But I don't know. I could be wrong. But if you're interested in that stuff, check it out. And yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the like button. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And feel free to leave a comment about this subject. So yeah, I hope you guys found it a little bit interesting. And see you next time. And also send me any recommendations that you may have of things you want me to talk about. All right, guys. Peace out.